Take a seat in the nosebleeds and get comfortable because episode 6 of FTN is here. Whether it be Spotify, Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, or YouTube, I am Brick Harris, and I'm with my good friend Blake O'Rulian, your hosts for this week's MMA Indulgence. Whether you're a servant to the scalp or a cage-side contender, we are glad to have you with us. Special thanks to D-Bar Music, Robert Jemias, and Sosi Wear Clothing. Blake, you ready to get going?
I am absolutely ready. Coming up in today's show, we are talking about highlights of UFC Fight Night Vancouver. There were plenty of those. We're also going to be talking about Justin Gaethje versus Cowboy Cerrone and what is next for both fighters. We'll be talking about this weekend's UFC Fight Night, Jeremy Stephens versus Yair Rodriguez. But first, we have some big news to discuss in round one. Brick, do you want to break it to the listeners?
I will try my best. Because I'm still kind of in a little bit of shock because I'm just so excited. So over the weekend, or I guess after last week's show, and we talked a little bit about the Edson Barboza-Paul Felder controversy, we started getting a lot of love. We got a few comments on that post. One from none other than Mr. Barboza's wife, Bruna Barboza, who tagged us in a comment and said we would love to have an interview with FTN and Edson Barboza. That is currently in the works right now. We have talked about doing it tomorrow, Wednesday, September 18th. So that is a big possibility.
That is a big plan. We are super excited about it. So what happened was we posted a video on Instagram, and Edson Barboza was actually the first one to comment, right. And he did the shrugging emoji, and then we reached out and on social media and said, hey, we'd love to talk to you. And then his wife said, hey, let's set this up. I'm his PR. Let's work this out. So we are really excited. We're going to be talking a lot about Paul Felder and that fight and what he thought, 10 days out from that event. We're also going to be talking about what he wants to do in the future, and we are also doing something we are doing a lot of collaboration, Brick, with different Instagram pages and MMA pages, and we also want to get your guys' thoughts, whoever is listening. If you have any questions for Edson Barboza, let us know. We will mention you at the beginning of the show, at the beginning of our question, before we ask it, and he will answer that question for you guys. So we're really looking forward to that. But yeah, Edson Barboza, a legendary fighter, fought everybody, 20-8, former contender, and absolute beast.
A little bit of background for Edson Jr. Barboza. He has been a contender in the lightweight division for a while. He absolutely just has ran the division, but has also had a couple of unlucky breaks. He's 33 years old, fights out of Brazil, fights for American Top Team. Like you said, Blake, he's 20-8. He has 22 UFC fights. He has been in the UFC for a good amount of time. He has 13 KO wins. He's tied for the most KO wins in all time in the lightweight division in the UFC. So Edson Barboza is a big name. By no means is he a rising star. By no means is he just on the come up. He's already there. He has 7 Fight of the Night bonuses, and in 2012 he earned Knockout of the Year against Terry Atim, which was unbelievable in and of itself.
I think in terms of the interview and what we should be most looking forward to and what the listeners can also be looking most forward to is outside of the Paul Felder controversy, which we will be talking about. I'm really excited to talk about his place at American Top Team. There's a lot of divide going on, especially with the welterweights and the lightweights, Colby Covington, Jorge Masvidal, Dustin Poirier. Where does Edson Barboza sit in this? Where does he stand? And does he have any sort of insight in terms of where these fighters are at? How much of this is playing heel? How much of this is legitimate beef? And so that's something that we all can look forward to, and I am super excited to have that conversation with him. Do you have anything else to say about that, Brick?
I like the opportunity that we just might be having in the next 24 hours to talk with this man, because he's been at the highest and at the lowest of the lightweight division, and he is arguably in the most contentious position, but he's kind of a fly on the wall. You know what I'm saying? We wouldn't have been able to get an interview with someone like Colby Covington or Kamaru Usman or Tyron Woodley, who is a part of all that drama, or maybe Dustin Poirier, a team member of American Top Team. So it's going to be really nice to get an outside opinion on all this madness that's going on from such a chill guy like Edson Barboza.
We are so excited for it. We are super grateful to both his wife and him for being so gracious to give us this opportunity. Tune in tomorrow. We will be posting this to our YouTube page. We will be posting it to our IGTV as well. So follow us on Instagram, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Let's go ahead and jump into round two. we're going to be talking about some of the biggest moments and some of our takeaways from UFC Fight Night Vancouver. My biggest thing, and I'm sure that's what we want to talk about mainly, Brick, is Tristan Connolly beating Michel Pereira. A 5-day notice, goes up a weight class, faces Michel Pereira, who missed weight, so it's almost like a lightweight facing a middleweight, and somehow is able to come away with that win. What were your initial thoughts of that?
Well, first of all, I texted you during the walkouts.
Yes.
Remember that? I texted you as Tristan Connolly was walking out, and this was after they had already shown the tail of the tape, right? They had talked about age, they talked about reach, all the height and weight advantages. So you're right. Michel Pereira was coming down from, I believe he was coming down from welterweight because the fight was at 170 or was supposed to be. Mm-hmm. And at this point, Tristan Connolly was trying to make weight at 170. He was coming basically from a featherweight division.
5 days notice.
Right, on a 5 days notice. And this dude, when he came out, I got to be honest, I respect the guy and everything, but when he came out, I texted you and I was like, Blake, if you haven't been watching the fights so far, I don't know if you should get on because it looks like it's going to be ugly. Like, I was prepared for Michel Pereira to go in there and decapitate this man.
Michel has been an absolute monster. He's been beating guys. He's been beating guys easily. He had a flying knee win in March, I believe, that was a highlight reel in itself. Not only that, but I know. Have you ever seen Rocky IV? It looked. They're listed at 6'1" and 5'10". It looked more like 6'3" and 5'8". It looked like Rocky Balboa versus Ivan Drago. It was an absolute. It was a scary sight to see in those initial moments. Anyways.
No. I was going to say it was David and Goliath. It was absolutely David and Goliath. You had Michel Pereira, this Brazilian animal who was just jacked. Like he's huge. He is gigantic. He's terrifying. And Tristan Connolly, no offense, looks like a math teacher. He came in there, no, like he's an incredible fighter, but he came in there looking like a math teacher. He was, just very pasty white. You could tell that he had some losses under his belt. He had almost no hype around him. You know what I'm saying? He wasn't dancing. He was just walking in there. It was like a businessman. Michel Pereira, it took 10 minutes to walk into the cage. He was doing capoeira. He was doing dances. He was literally just dancing along to his song. And the fight itself, do you want to talk about it? I'm just so, blown away at what actually even happened.
So I'll break it down a little bit. To start, yes, you're totally correct. I think Michel Pereira walked into this fight and said, this is going to be another day at the office. This guy's on 4 days' notice. He's going up a weight class. There's no chance he's going to defeat me. He jumps in. He's dancing on the way in. He's dancing inside the cage once the bell rings. He is ready to go. He's having fun. And I liked what DC said when he said, Daniel Cormier said, for a guy who missed weight, he's doing a lot of backflips in this cage. Michel Pereira goes around chasing him, looking like it was, the big sixth grader running after a little third grader or some sort of thing. And Tristan Connolly gave him everything he had, took him to the ground, used his jiu-jitsu, was able to stand up and strike with him a little bit. It was absolutely incredible. Takedown after takedown after takedown. A ground fight all in one. And for me personally, as a jiu-jitsu fighter myself, I loved seeing jiu-jitsu in the octagon. There was a lot of that this weekend in UFC Vancouver, but I was blown away at Tristan Connolly, and truly a star was born that night.
Verdict MMA put out a post I believe it was just after the fight, saying that it was 14% predicted that Tristan Connolly would walk out of that cage as with his hand raised as the winner. But not only did he beat him by defensive jiu-jitsu, he was striking him. He was beating him in strikes, in my opinion. He was tiring him out. He had way better wrestling. He had way better jiu-jitsu, way better striking. And as I was watching it, I was talking to my wife, and I said, oh my gosh, this is going to be on one of those UFC YouTube videos where a UFC fan posts it and says, when being cocky backfires or when trash talk backfires. The dude was doing back handsprings and backflips in the middle of the cage in the first 30 seconds of the round, and I was thinking, wow, this is a circus act. And if this dude does not pull off this win, this is going to go down as one of the worst, trash talking gone wrong YouTube videos I've ever seen.
It was incredible. I also wanted to jump into really quickly Glover Teixeira beating Nikita Krylov. I just wanted to address this because I'm kind of getting tired of it. I'm sick of the light heavyweights are full of rising stars. There's a couple, Dominic Reyes, Johnny Walker, I'll give you that. Yeah. But the light heavyweights at the top of the division cannot be stopped. Nikita Krylov had won 5 of his last 6, and he had never gone to this decision. And everybody was calling him a rising star, and he was this big deal that he was going to end Glover's career in the UFC. And Glover goes in there and is the epitome of old man strength. This division is supposed to be stacked with young talent, but of the top 9 fighters, Dominic Reyes is the only one, and Volkan Ozdemir, if you consider him a rookie, I guess, in the game as a young rising star, and then Johnny Walker being ranked 11th. The light heavyweight division is interesting. The guys at the top have been at the top for a long time. 39-year-old Glover Teixeira goes in there and beats a 27-year-old Nikita Krylov, 12 years difference in age, and at those ages where you begin to age and your performance begins to deteriorate. That shouldn't be happening, but for some reason it is. I don't know if Dominic Reyes is going to take the throne from Jones. I don't know if Johnny Walker can do it. I don't know if the light heavyweight division is going to be doing a whole lot of movement over the next few years, but it is interesting to see all of these veterans in the division who have been at the top of the division for years and years continue to knock out these big, young, rising stars in the UFC light heavyweight division.
And now for round 3, let's dive into possibly the biggest storyline of UFC Fight Night Vancouver, Justin Gaethje versus Donald Cowboy Cerrone. What a fight. Justin Gaethje earns his 18th knockout win in the first round against a seasoned veteran, an absolute legend in Donald Cerrone. It was incredibly impressive, and honestly, I gotta say, I called it. I was very happy about my decision in calling it Justin Gaethje. Speaking of calling it, Blake, we reached out on social media and said we want you to answer our poll. We want you to answer slide in our DMs and let us know what your predictions are for this fight between Cerrone and Gaethje. It ended up being a quick end, like a few people predicted, but someone had the most accurate prediction.
Yeah, so we want to give a big shout out to @FightNoise on Instagram. They reached out to us and gave us their prediction, and they said Gaethje second round TKO, and that was surprisingly the most accurate of all. With that was the closest thing. Nobody else actually predicted Gaethje TKO in the first 2 rounds. So big shout out to Fight Noise, and we want to give a big thank you to everybody who reached out, everybody who gave us their opinions, their analysis, and we really appreciate any sort of conversation we can have on our Instagram. So that was a very, very quick fight, and something that I think, Brick, you and I both talked about. We both saw it sort of coming. We both see Gaethje as this rising star with heavy hands. I wanted to talk really quickly and see what your thoughts were in the size. Did you see the size differential in Gaethje and Cowboy?
Cowboy looked like a featherweight.
Cowboy looked so thin, so sunken in. I don't know if it was a bad weight cut, but he looked very, very thin. And Gaethje, he doesn't just look like a welterweight. He looks like a middleweight. He is huge, Brick. And I was so impressed by his ability to get in there, stand with Cowboy, and just get it over with as fast as possible. The difference in size between him and Cowboy was staggering. I am really excited to see what his next steps are. But for right now, I am really excited to see the rise of Justin Gaethje, how special he is, and how good he looked.
You talked about Justin Gaethje being the middle child of the lightweight division last week, and as much as I enjoyed that take, it took me a little while to think about it and just honestly disagree a little bit. I think that Justin Gaethje has been a rising star for a long time, and his only 2 losses in his career are against lightweight legends, in Eddie Alvarez and Dustin Poirier, hard-fought TKO losses, but the guy is a banger. He has some of the most impressive knockouts in the lightweight division over the last 5 years. I don't think that Justin Gaethje is going to be stuck in that middle ground for a while. He called out the winner of Khabib and Tony Ferguson, which, if there is a matchup in the lightweight division that I want to see, it is Khabib versus Justin Gaethje. Justin Gaethje comes from an insane wrestling background. And you talk about size, I want to talk about strength. Okay, Justin Gaethje is big, but the shots that he hits you with are unbelievable. I got to give a shout out to Michael Johnson for lasting as long as he did in Gaethje's UFC debut, after Gaethje had gone 16-0 in the WSOF with 14 or so knockouts, something insane like that. The guy has 18 knockouts. He's got the heaviest hands in the division, but he's also a wrestler.
He's also a, yes, All-American wrestler.
So him going against Khabib in the next year or so is the fight that I am praying for.
Let's jump straight into round 4, which is this typical similar conversation that we've just already been starting to have is what is next for Justin Gaethje and Cowboy Cerrone. And I completely agree with you, Brick. I would love to see the winner of Tony versus Khabib go up against Justin Gaethje. It'll be interesting to see what the UFC does with him because he did not call out. Well, in fact, he mentioned Conor and he said he's retired. And he said, I don't want anything to really do with that. However, do you think that he takes that money fight, which he deserves? We see what happens. One of the greatest striking contests we might ever see. I don't know if we'll see Gaethje's wrestling in that, but that could be a huge plus for him if he does see Conor's striking to be something that he has to defend against. But I think Justin Gaethje spending a little bit of time, giving Conor his comeback, they both fight, and it's sort of this little 4-man tournament of winner of Gaethje versus Conor faces winner of Khabib versus Tony. If that were to be what ends up happening, but if that were to be what happens, I think that would be great. I think the Conor Gaethje thing would be a striking match for the 8 to have a little bit of the peace between the time of. I'm sorry. The only issue I see, Brick, is the chance of a man named George St. Pierre getting in the way of this whole thing going on in lightweight. George St. Pierre has a huge pull. Khabib has mentioned he does not want to fight for the rest of his life. Khabib knows that his fights are numbered. I think it's going to be Tony versus Khabib, and then once that's over, the only name in his mouth is going to be George St. Pierre. If that's the case, Justin might have to take a fight with Conor. He might have to take a fight with Tony. And this all depends on if Khabib wins that fight. But it's definitely a talking point. I don't know exactly if Justin Gaethje will, and I stick with my point from last week that Justin Gaethje might not get that opportunity simply because there's a Conor, there's a George St. Pierre, there's a Tony Ferguson, all in the way. And I don't think Conor is necessarily a priority to Khabib whatsoever. It's been reported that he has zero interest in fighting him, but it could be a possibility if Dana's in charge.
To answer your question, I think Justin Gaethje definitely should fight Conor McGregor. It's probably the smartest business decision that Gaethje could make since leaving the WSOF and coming to the UFC, yes. Right? Conor McGregor is coming off, he's still not off a year-long hiatus from fighting. He has gotten into so much nonsense since then. He's been nothing but making negative tabloids and what have you. Justin Gaethje is rolling. He is on a 3-fight win streak, a 3-knockout win streak. The guy has nothing, I don't want to say he has nothing to lose, but the smartest fight he could possibly make is in a Conor McGregor who got starched in his last fight and who is not the same as he used to be, but is still a massive money fight. If Justin Gaethje were to knock out Conor McGregor, for example, a man who has never been knocked out in his career, if he knocks out Conor McGregor, the former god of the lightweight division, there is nothing left for Justin Gaethje than Khabib. Because I think Khabib is going to defeat Tony Ferguson, I do, and I think the best matchup for Justin Gaethje in this entire division is going to be someone like Khabib, because he's stood up with strikers, he's proven that he can wrestle and that he can drop bombs. I think the best matchup between him is, I think the best matchup for him is Khabib Nurmagomedov.
From a fan's perspective, I totally agree. I think Conor Gaethje would be so much fun just to watch. Just to watch two guys that you know are going to stand up and strike and do everything that they can. Conor's kickboxing versus Gaethje's boxing. It would be an absolute... It would be a blast to watch that fight. And not only that, but the knockout power of Gaethje versus the precision of Conor McGregor, if he still has it, which we don't know if he does. We don't know if Conor's been working on something completely different and he comes in a different fighter. We don't know. But Justin Gaethje would be a fun place to test that out. Let's also talk about Cowboy Cerrone really quick and where we see him going. If I'm Cowboy, I think he needed to take some time off. You can't be fighting. I was talking with one of my friends yesterday at jiu-jitsu. You can't be fighting 4 times a year, saying yes to every single fight, and be 100%. That's been the downfall of Cowboy's entire career, and it continues to be more of a downfall as his career proceeds. When you fight every 2 months, you don't have time to sit back and reflect. And if I were Cowboy, I would really take some time to sit back, enjoy some time with my family, reflect on why you've lost your last 2 fights and how you can get better and get back up to where you deserve to be. Maybe a fight with Paul Felder, maybe a fight with a Gregor Gillespie or something like that. But something so that he can really take some time and go into a fight, head clear, ready to go, and get back to who he really is, which we all know Cowboy is, a special, once-in-a-lifetime talent.
See, but I kind of disagree because Cowboy, that's not who Cowboy is.
No, it's not.
Cowboy's, like you just said, Cowboy needs to become who he really is, and who Cowboy really is fight 4 times a year. Take any fight that he can get and get in there and brawl. Cowboy is an absolute legend in the sport. This is what I have written down, is that Cowboy is an old soul, but he's more of a fighter than Khabib Nurmagomedov, in my opinion. He is more of a brawler, more of a gangster, more of a get down and fighter than Khabib, because Khabib is perfectly okay with vacating the belt for a year and, doing with his suspension and whatever. Khabib is more than happy to sit out fights with Tony Ferguson, put off difficult fights. Khabib is more than happy to possibly retire in the next couple of years. It's like Khabib has not been tested nearly as much as I think he should be. If there's one man who deserves a break, it's Cowboy Cerrone. He has had probably the most impressive and difficult careers of anyone in the UFC. I think he deserves time off, but mind over matter. Cowboy's mindset is not the same as a Khabib Nurmagomedov. He will never settle for, good enough. Good enough never is for Cowboy Cerrone. He will always, like he said after he's lost, he's like, you know what, no, I'm not sitting down. I want to fight again in December. I want that belt. He's an old soul. He has so many losses. He holds so many records in the UFC, but nothing is good enough for him.
I love Cowboy Cerrone. He's great. You want to jump into round 5?
Let's do it.
Jeremy Stephens versus Yair Rodriguez this weekend at UFC Fight Night. And we were texting a little bit earlier, Brick, and I think we're going to see differently on this one. Who do you have winning this fight?
I have Yair Rodriguez. I do. I have been doing nothing the last 24 hours but research and watching the Jeremy Stephens fights side by side with Yair Rodriguez's fights, and it's just a decision in me. I don't dislike Jeremy Stephens. I don't think he's a bad fighter. I don't think Yair Rodriguez is the greatest fighter of all times. But you want to know what I do think Yair Rodriguez is? I think he should change his name. I think he should change his name to Han Hones, because he is the Mexican version of John Jones, my friend. The man does a one-handed cartwheel once he enters the cage every time, just like John Jones does. The man's striking, creativity, accuracy is so compatible to that of John Jones. I don't want to necessarily compare the talent of the two, considering John Jones is the greatest of all time, and Yair Rodriguez has 16 fights under his professional resume. So I think he's incredibly talented. I do. I see him picking Jeremy Stephens apart, and he's so quick. Yair Rodriguez is so much quicker than Jeremy Stephens. I love this matchup, though, because they're so different. Jeremy Stephens, to me, is like a Uriah Faber with way more power, right? Super low center of gravity, just a bulldog-looking type guy. But Jeremy Stephens drops bombs. And here's the only reason I'm going against him, is because Yair Rodriguez is so much faster. He is so much quicker. He is the Edson Barbosa of the featherweight division, and he is a rising star. I think he beats Jeremy Stephens, and he moves on to either a Brian Ortega or an Alexander Volkanovski, something like that.
Brick, Yair, you're all about records. You're always talking about people's records and how much that defines them. Yair Rodriguez has 2 losses. Jeremy Stephens has 16. Yair Rodriguez's 2 losses are from knockout. Jeremy Stephens just so happens to be a knockout artist at 145. 19 of his 28 wins are by knockout. He likes to get in there, and he likes to come at you, and he likes to take your head off. Yair has lost to Frankie Edgar, and if it weren't for that lucky spinning elbow, he probably would have lost to Chain Sung Jung as well, or it would have been a split decision. Jeremy Stephens, on the other hand, is a vet. Jeremy Stevens has been in the UFC since 2007 with wins over Dennis Bermudez, Renan Barão, who's a former champ, RDA, former champ, Gilbert Melendez, former champ, and losing a split decision to former champ as well, Anthony Pettis. Jeremy Stevens, you texted me earlier and you said that you mentioned his record, that he's lost 16 fights and that's why he's not who he, that he's, not as special of a fighter. And you mentioned his record. Jeremy Stevens is like Cowboy Cerrone. He's fought everybody. He's lost to Jose Aldo. He's lost to huge names like Cowboy Cerrone. He's lost to all of these bigger guys. Jeremy Stevens goes in there and he fights. And he's going to go in there, and I think he's going to fight Yair Rodriguez. And I do see where the speed factor is going to be a big thing. However, Jeremy Stevens has spent the last 6 weeks in Mexico training, getting used to the climate, getting used to where he's going to be and where he's going to be fighting. And I think that he's going to have a lot better cardio. He's going to be quicker. He's going to be sharper. He's coming off of another tough loss where he was very disappointed in himself, and he doesn't take these losses lightly. I don't think Yair Rodriguez is nearly tested as Jeremy Stevens is, and Jeremy Stevens is going to take him to school.
Jeremy Stevens, in one of his last fights, I can't remember which one it was, but he got down on his knees and he begged Dana White for a title shot. Do you remember that? It was in a post-fight interview, and he gets down on his knees. It was kind of cringy. But here's my only problem with Jeremy Stevens, and I'd like to quote the almost retired Conor McGregor, who said this a few years ago. Who the is that guy?
Made him famous.
Absolutely made him famous. Now, Jeremy Stevens is a brawler, like I just said, but when he got down on his knees and he begged for a title shot, he had plenty of opportunities to prove who he could be. Jeremy Stevens has, in my opinion, the least impressive resume in the entire featherweight division. He's lost to everyone that he should lose to. He is the punching bag for the better fighters in the featherweight division. Zabit, Jose Aldo, Moisiano, Frankie Edgar, Max Holloway, Cub Swanson, Donald Cerrone, Anthony Pettis. Those are the guys in the featherweight division. Now, if Jeremy Stevens wanted to say, I am a title contender, lose half of those fights, and you still might not be in the conversation, but he's lost to every single important featherweight fighter. So I don't see him picking off this rising star in Yair.
Did you not hear what I said, though? Win over Dennis Bermudez. Win over Renan Barão, former champ. Win over RDA, former champ. Win over Gilbert Melendez, former champ. And that Anthony Pettis loss was a split decision and a close call. This guy is no scrub by any means. This guy has been in the UFC for 12 years. He knows what he's doing. And he's going to show Yair Rodriguez that he's a kid and he's not tested and he's got a lot more to learn before he can go and start fighting with these other big dogs that Jeremy Stevens fights.
Donald Cerrone, though, his record is very similar to Jeremy Stevens. He's got a similar amount of mileage on him, and he...
Who is Cowboy fighting, though?
No, Cowboy... I'm just saying, Cowboy fought a rising star who was, 20-2 in Justin Gaethje?
Justin Gaethje is much, much more of a problem than Yair Rodriguez.
But I think Donald Cerrone is more of a problem than Jeremy Stevens is. Oh, my gosh. I'm just saying, it's so similar. You've got a guy in 2 losses in Justin Gaethje, rising star, young guy, respectful, comes in, and he knocks out this old veteran, an old dog who's very respectable. I'm not shaming Jeremy Stevens or Cowboy, but he comes in and dusts him. Now, I think we have almost the exact same situation here with Yair Rodriguez, young star, 2 losses under his belt, and I think a better striker, a lot like the Gaethje-Cerrone matchup. I think he will pick off Jeremy Stevens in the early rounds of this fight.
We'll have to sit and wait. We'll have to see what happens. And we will return to this, and we will remember this little debate that we've had.
Absolutely.
Brick, I love doing this show with you, man. All right, we are going to jump into our final thoughts of the week.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Brick's Final Thoughts. Today, I would like to be talking about something I've never talked about before, and that's the WEC and Jon Jones. Now, some of my favorite points I've ever made on the show are about Jon Jones, my favorite fighter possibly to ever live. And when I was organizing my thoughts for this one segment, I tried to find in the UFC history who is the most impressive and dangerous man. Because we have guys like Khabib nowadays who have very modern fighting style, ground and pound wrestling, very smart. But I was trying to find who's the most dangerous, who's the most violent champion in the UFC. Now, I got to the point where I thought of Chuck Liddell. Chuck Liddell was an absolute animal, right? Chuck Liddell was the first real star of the UFC. He became an absolute spectacle in the UFC, an absolute spectacle. Now, Chuck Liddell was the light heavyweight king for a long time, kind of back and forth, incredible career. The guy honestly was just a dog. He put the BA in bang. He put the raw in brawler. And I think that is why John Jones is so great. Now let me get to that. So Chuck Liddell, as much of a legend as he was, just the king of the UFC at that point, he was the king of a company that was worth around $3 million at the time in the early 2000s, late 1990s. And John Jones is now the number one pound-for-pound fighter and possibly the greatest fighter in a company that's worth probably over 5 or 6 billion. So there's a bit of a staggering difference there. What I'd like to get to is that Chuck Liddell lost to Quentin Rampage Jackson twice. He lost to Shogun Rua. Now, when I saw that, I was like, okay, yeah, you know what? I can't really go with Chuck Liddell anymore because he's lost these fights, and you know, anytime someone loses fights, it takes away from their stock of being the most dominant champion. Now, let's see, who has beaten Shogun Rua and Quentin Rampage Jackson? Also Rashad Evans, also Chael Sonnen, also Lyoto Machida, also Daniel Cormier twice. Who won the heavyweight belt when he was just 21 years old, becoming the youngest UFC champion of all time? That's John Jones. I will always and forever stick with my opinion of, at least until 2019, John Jones is the most impressive, strong, talented, and vicious fighter to ever step foot in the professional octagon. Change my mind. Change it.
When I write these final thoughts, I like to look around and see what's going on in the sport. This one hit me like a ton of bricks. Do we see what is happening to Jorge Masvidal? Do we realize what is going on? March 16th, 2019, 16 years into his career and 45 fights under his belt. Coming off of 2 losses and on the brink of a possible layoff from the UFC, what does he do? Knocks out rising star and massive favorite Darren Till in front of his home country. A few months later, after months of talk and belt contention on the line, he shuts up the world. And he shuts up an undefeated grappling legend in 5 seconds. Jorge Masvidal is the one that almost got away. The girl that you have known forever, hung out with for years, and one day you finally see it. It hits you like a ton of bricks. While we have all been head over heels for Brock Lesnar, Ronda Rousey, and Conor McGregor, Jorge Masvidal has been there all along. The question is, are there more like him out there? Are there more guys who seem to be in the twilight of their career, but they're actually ready to become the fun, likable superstar they've always been? Are we spending too much time on big fighters or the champs? Or maybe is this a one-time thing? And we might never see it again. I don't have the answers to those questions. What I do know is that we, as fans, are lucky. We get to see Masvidal become the star that he is. Someone we have known about for years, someone who looked to be almost done, and now we appreciate him for who he really is. We are lucky we have guys like him. We are also lucky we have guys like Nate Diaz. Never been the hero, never been the heel, never been the biggest catch in the room. But they're just themselves. They are just some bad MFers. So I ask again, do we see what is going on here? On November 5th at UFC 244, we won't see the biggest name. We won't see a shiny, undisputed belt. For the first time in over 3 years, we get to see a people's main event as the main event. We get to see 2 of the coolest fighters, 2 fighters who have kept it real for a real long time, 2 stars that the true fans get to celebrate, 2 that almost got away. But it looks like we booked them just in time. As I've said before, and I will continue to say, what a time to be a fan.
The ever so eloquent Blake O'Rulian with his final takes. My gosh, you love to write, don't you?
I do love to write. I like to write when it's something I actually care about. So.
You're a modern day Shakespeare with fighting. Anyways.
Cage fighting.
Yep. There we go with episode 6. We are so glad we could have had you listening to us. Remember to tune in on Spotify, Apple Podcast, YouTube, and SoundCloud. We are From the Nosebleeds. We're so excited for our possible interview with Edson Barbosa tomorrow. Please tune in and check that out. That's going to be a lot of fun. Also, we'd like to let you guys know we have merchandise that is ready to go at sosiwear.com/FTN podcast. That's SOSIwear.com/FTN podcast. We're so excited. Go check out the designs. Big shout out to Robert Jemias and all those who have made this show possible.
For anybody interested in merch, it helps us with any sort of proceeds that we get, equipment, production value, things like that. That link is in our Instagram bio at the bottom. You will see Sosiwear. Click on that. Help us out, and we will do everything we can to continue to give you the content you love. Brick, you got anything else to say?
Hopefully, we will see you tomorrow for the Edson Barbosa interview. And then later on in the week, we will probably be posting a lot about Yair and his win he's going to have over Jeremy Stevens. Other than that, we'll see you guys on Tuesday.
Don't be a Richard. Send us off.